In a world where images are photoshopped to perfection, where smiles are curated and moments are staged, sometimes, the most brutal truth isn't revealed by what's added, but by what's erased. Forgotten Ties isn't a place for fairy tales or perfect families. It exists to unearth the secrets buried under layers of dust, the lies we tell ourselves to survive, and the scars that only show when you look closely. Our story today doesn't start in a haunted house or a desolate forest. It starts in the most familiar, most mundane place. A suburban home, with its old cotton curtains and a meticulously manicured backyard. But this wasn't the home of a happy family. It was an empty house, a dusty tomb to my father's life. After he passed, I, Leo, had to return to the place I had left 2 decades ago. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. It was a burden, a duty, and I felt like I was stepping into a foreign world where every corner held a lie. I began clearing out the house, sifting through old books and wrinkled letters, trying to find some semblance of meaning. I found none. Instead, tucked away in my parents' closet, I found a forgotten cardboard box, sealed with ancient tape. As I opened it, a heavy, musty smell filled the air, the scent of time standing still. Inside, among scattered papers and worthless trinkets, I found a family photo album. I flipped through the faded pages, seeing a younger, lankier version of myself, my mother with her strained smile, and my father with the cold, distant look I always remembered. Then I saw it. The family portrait on the very last page, taken on a warm June afternoon I couldn't recall. It was our family standing in front of an old station wagon, me, my father, and my mother, and someone else. It was a young girl with chocolate-brown curls framing her face, and a soft blue cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her smile wasn't forced like my mother's. It was genuine, radiant, like a burst of sunshine. And that face had been scratched out. Not a random scratch, but a deliberate, violent one, as if someone had wanted to erase her from existence. The scratch was so deep it tore through the paper itself, leaving a hollow, circular void where her eyes should have been. Primal fear shot through me. Who was this girl? And why had she been so viciously erased? I held the photo in my hands, feeling its strange weight. There were no other photos of her in the album. This one stood alone, a haunting reminder that she had once existed, and a brutal confirmation that she no longer did. The feeling wasn't one of loss, but of a crime concealed. I didn't have a sister. I was an only child. Or was I taught to believe I was? I gathered my courage and took the photo to my mother, Eleanor. She sat in the living room, a half-finished knitted scarf in her lap. She looked at the photo, and the color drained from her face. She recoiled, her eyes wide with terror. "Mom, I found this," I said, my voice trembling. "Who is she?" "I don't remember." My mother didn't answer. Instead, she rose, her hands shaking, letting the ball of yarn fall to the floor. "Mother, where did you get that?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "It's been lost for so long." I knew something was terribly wrong. My parents were not liars, or at least that's what I had believed. They were serious, rule-abiding people. But in that moment, I saw a look of pure fear in my mother's eyes, a fear I had never seen before. It wasn't the fear of a grieving mother. It was the fear of a mother hiding a terrible secret. She tried to snatch the photo from my hands, but I held on. "Mom, you have to tell me. Who is she?" I felt like I was talking to a stranger. My mother looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with despair. Then she turned and ran up the stairs, leaving me alone in the cold room, the photo with the scratched-out face clutched in my hand. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on me. My mother's muffled sobs echoed from upstairs, a sound of pure agony, but she didn't come back down. She left me alone with the question. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was a question she would never answer, that only fueled my need to find the truth. I couldn't accept that I had a sister who had been erased from my life, from my memory, and no one had told me. I began to tear the house apart, not to clean anymore, but to search for evidence, for small pieces of a buried story. I found a small box, deep in my mother's closet, beneath a pile of old coats. It was locked, but there was no key. I pried it open, feeling a sense of guilt, but my curiosity overpowered everything. Inside, I found a small butterfly hairpin, a faded blue ribbon, and a letter written in a child's handwriting. "Dear Leo," the letter began, "you will always be the best brother a girl could ask for. Don't ever forget me." It was signed, Amelia. Amelia. The name, I had no memory of it. The name of the sister I didn't know, the one scratched from the photograph, the one erased from my memories. I held the items, feeling their weight. What had happened to her? Why had I been lied to my entire life? I knew I needed to look for answers elsewhere. I began asking the old neighbors, the ones who had watched my family grow up. Most were elderly, living in a quiet neighborhood where secrets were well kept. Mrs. Gable, the old woman across the street, had been there for 50 years. At first, she was hesitant, but then, when I mentioned a sister, her eyes took on a different light. She invited me inside, and we sat on her old sofa. "Amelia," she said, her voice a whisper. "Such a beautiful girl. So smart. Always asking questions." She spoke of Amelia with a tenderness I hadn't expected. She told me of a vibrant girl who was full of life, always happy, always eager to explore the world. She told me how she would come over to her house to hear stories, how she always carried a little notebook to jot down interesting things she found. "What happened to her?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. Mrs. Gable looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "One night, she just disappeared. Your parents told everyone she went to live with an aunt in California. But no one believed it." She recounted how my father became very strange after that. He became cold, distant, and he never spoke of Amelia again. "A terrible secret," she said. "Sometimes, I would see your father staring into the empty space in the backyard, as if he was looking at a ghost. Something wasn't right, Leo. Your parents, they weren't who they seemed." Mrs. Gable's words planted a seed of doubt in me. I knew there was something wrong. My father had always been a mysterious man, a man of few words, but I had never thought he could hide such a dark secret. I went back to my parents' house, and once again I started to search. I found an old journal of my mother's, tucked away in a bookshelf. It was a small notebook, filled with careful entries. I started reading, and the first pages were mundane. Daily chores, small complaints. But as I flipped to the last pages, I saw hurried handwriting, as if my mother had been in a panic. "Robert, what is he doing? We can't hide it forever. She's getting suspicious. She knows too much. What are we going to do?" I read the words, my heart pounding in my chest. Robert was my father's name, and she was surely Amelia. Had she discovered something? What was the secret? A cold chill ran down my spine. I continued to read, desperate for a clue. "We have no other choice," another entry said. "To protect this family, we have to." And then the words stopped. Only a smeared trail of ink remained, as if my mother had been crying as she wrote them. Everything clicked into place. My father was hiding a secret, and Amelia had discovered it. And to protect that secret, they had done something to her. A terrifying realization dawned on me. My father, the man I had always looked up to, might have done something to his own daughter. Something terrible. I held the photograph of Amelia, her face a void, and looked at it. I felt like I was looking at a portrait of a crime that had been hidden. I couldn't live with this. I had to find the truth. I had to find Amelia. Couldn't sleep that night. Every hour, the image of the girl with the scratched-out face in the family portrait haunted me. I wondered, what did she find out? And how terrible was it that it could make my parents do something so horrific? I felt like I was living in a horror movie, and I didn't know if I could handle the truth. I did something I had never dared to do before. I went through all of my father's papers, looking for anything that might be connected to Amelia. I found an old file box in the basement. My father had always said it held important work documents, and I never thought it could hold anything else. But when I opened it, I found old newspaper clippings, cut out from years ago. One newspaper clipping was about a large embezzlement case in a local company, and my father was mentioned in a small article. Company's financial officer arrested for embezzlement. It was about a man named James Miller, a close friend of my father's, and he had committed suicide after his arrest. I kept searching and I found a copy of a police investigation. It mentioned that my father had been questioned about some suspicious money transfers. In the end, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. But something felt wrong. My father was innocent. But one question kept lingering in my mind. Why were these old newspaper clippings in my father's old file box? A chilling feeling began to creep over me. Was my father involved in that embezzlement case? And had Amelia found out? Had she threatened to expose him? I returned to the living room, where my mother was sitting on the sofa, her eyes vacant. She hadn't spoken to me since I showed her the photo. I looked at her, and I felt a great wave of anger welling up inside me. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "What did you hide from me? What did Amelia find out?" My mother looked at me, and she started to cry. She didn't say anything. She just wept. "Mom, tell me," I yelled. "She was my sister. You hid a sister from me my entire life. You let my father scratch her face from a family photo. Why? Why?" My mother looked at me, and she began to speak, her voice so small I could barely hear her. I couldn't do anything else," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Your father, Robert, he had done something wrong. He had embezzled money from the company, and James Miller, he was the one who helped him. And when the police started to investigate, he made it look like James was the only one who was guilty. And Amelia, she found out about it." I felt my heart stop. My father wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal. "Amelia said she was going to go to the police," my mother continued. "She said she couldn't live with this lie. Robert, he told me we had to do something. He said we couldn't let her do that. I tried to talk her out of it. I tried to protect her. But Robert, he threatened that he would do something worse if I didn't help him." The pain and regret in my mother's voice tore at my heart. He took her away," my mother said, her voice trembling. "He took her to a place where she couldn't tell anyone, a place where she would never be able to get out. I had to choose between you and her. And Robert, he told me that if I didn't help him, he would tell everyone that I was the one who did it." My mother collapsed, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. I had to erase her from our lives. I had to scratch her face from the family photo, to hide the truth. The truth was revealed, but it was worse than anything I had ever imagined. My father wasn't just a fraud. He was a monster who had destroyed his own daughter's life. I looked at my mother, and I felt sorry for her. She had lived with this lie for 20 years, and she had suffered in silence. But I couldn't forgive her. She was an accomplice. She had helped my father hide the truth. I picked up the photograph of Amelia, and I looked at her scratched-out face. I knew I couldn't let this end here. I had to find her. I had to bring her back. The truth. There are truths so painful we want to deny their existence. But when we face them, we find that we have no choice but to fight. I had a confrontation with my mother, and she told me the truth. She gave me the address of a place where my father had taken Amelia. It was a secluded mental institution, hidden deep in a desolate forest, a place built to hide terrible secrets. "He said she was crazy," my mother said, her voice shaking. "He said she was delusional about everything. He made everyone believe she was out of her mind." I didn't hesitate. I drove to that mental institution. It was a cold, dark place, with heavy iron gates and high walls. It didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like a prison. I told the director that I was Amelia's brother, and I was there to take her back. The director looked at me strangely, as if he was suspicious of me. "We have her contained here," he said, his voice cold. "She is a dangerous patient. She is delusional about a grand conspiracy." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "She is not delusional. She is telling the truth. She was committed here because she knew too much. I presented the documents, the copies from my mother's journal, the old newspaper clippings. I did everything I could to convince them. And finally, I saw her. Amelia. She wasn't the girl in the photograph anymore. She was a gaunt woman, with empty eyes and faded hair. When I said her name, she looked at me, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Leo?" she asked, her voice shaking. "My brother." I held her, and I felt her trembling in my arms. "I'm here," I said. "I came back." We left that mental institution together. I took her to a safe place, and she started telling me her story. She had found out that my father had embezzled money from the company, and he had orchestrated a plan to pin the crime on his best friend, James Miller. "I told him I was going to go to the police," she said. "And he told me he wouldn't let me. He told me he would ruin me. And my mother, she didn't do anything." This story has become a lesson for me. It has taught me that the biggest secrets aren't hidden in the dark. They are hidden in plain sight. It has taught me that the biggest scars aren't the ones on the body, but the ones on the soul. The story of Amelia isn't a story of a woman who was crazy. It's a story of a woman who was destroyed for trying to stand up for the truth. It's a story of a family destroyed by a terrible secret. When I look at the family portrait, I no longer see an erased person. I see a strong woman, a woman who has endured so much. I've kept that photograph. I will never erase it. It's a reminder that we should never forget what happened. And that is why I created Forgotten Ties. If you are still here, if you feel the story, then know that there are some stories, some ties, that are worth holding on to and not forgetting. So, hit that like button, subscribe to Forgotten Ties, and don't forget to turn on notifications so we can continue to unearth the secrets buried in the dark together.